My neighbor demanded I tear down my fence because it blocks my perfect view. When I refused, she hired workers to destroy it and post it online, fixed my neighbor's ugly yard. Smirking, she said, "Now everyone can enjoy my landscaping." I quietly handed her the lawsuit papers and whispered, "Hope you're ready to pay for a new one twice as high." Living in a quiet Denver suburb, my home was my sanctuary, a modest house with a backyard enclosed by a sturdy wooden fence. This fence provided privacy and a clear boundary between my property and my neighbor Margaret's. Margaret was known for her meticulously maintained garden, a vibrant display of flowers and shrubs that she often showcased to the community. She took immense pride in her work, and her garden was her crowning achievement. One afternoon, as I was tending to my lawn, Margaret approached me. She was in her late 50s, with short, graying hair and a demeanor that exuded authority. She greeted me with a tight smile and got straight to the point. "I've been meaning to talk to you about your fence," she began, her tone clipped. "It's blocking the view of my garden from the street. I think it would be best if you removed it so everyone can appreciate the beauty of my landscaping." I was taken aback. The fence had been there since I moved in, providing the privacy I valued. Removing it was out of the question. "Margaret, I understand you take great pride in your garden, and it's indeed beautiful," I replied, striving to keep my voice calm. "However, the fence is important for my privacy and security. I'm not comfortable taking it down." Her eyes narrowed, and her lips pressed into a thin line. "I see," she said curtly before turning on her heel and walking back to her house without another word. I assumed that was the end of the matter, but I was wrong. A few days later, I returned home from work to find a group of workers in my backyard, dismantling the fence. Panic surged through me as I approached them. "What are you doing?" I demanded, trying to keep my voice steady. One of the workers looked up, seemingly unfazed. "Ms. Margaret hired us to remove this fence," he said simply. Fury bubbled within me. I marched over to Margaret's house and knocked firmly on her door. She opened it with a smug expression, as if she had been expecting me. "Margaret, you had no right to tear down my fence," I said, my voice shaking with anger. She shrugged, an infuriatingly nonchalant gesture. The fence was an eyesore. Now everyone can enjoy the view of my garden. I did us all a favor. I couldn't believe her audacity. Without another word, I turned and walked away, my mind racing with the implications of her actions. That evening, I documented everything. The conversation, the unauthorized removal of the fence, and the names of the workers involved. I also took photographs of the now exposed backyard and the remnants of the fence. The next day, I contacted a lawyer to discuss my options. After reviewing the situation, my lawyer informed me that Margaret had violated property laws by removing the fence without my consent. We decided to file a lawsuit against her for trespassing and property damage. The legal process was grueling and took several months. Margaret remained defiant throughout, refusing to acknowledge any wrongdoing. However, the evidence was clear, and the court ruled in my favor. Margaret was ordered to pay for the reconstruction of the fence, as well as additional damages for the distress she had caused. With the settlement, I had a new fence built this time, 2 feet taller than the previous one. It provided even more privacy, effectively blocking any view into my backyard. Margaret's beloved garden was now completely hidden from the street. The day the new fence was completed, I saw Margaret standing in her yard, glaring at the towering structure. I couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. She had tried to impose her will on me, but in the end, her actions had backfired spectacularly. From that point on, Margaret and I had minimal interaction. She continued to tend to her garden, though without the audience she had once enjoyed. I relished the newfound privacy and the knowledge that I had stood up for myself against her unreasonable demands. The experience taught me a valuable lesson about boundaries, both physical and personal. It's essential to stand firm and protect what's rightfully yours, even in the face of overbearing neighbors. A few weeks after the new fence went up, things got weirder. One morning, I stepped out to grab my paper and found a pile of mulch dumped right at the edge of my driveway. I figured maybe it was a delivery mistake, so I called around. No one in the neighborhood had ordered mulch. When I checked my security camera footage later that night, I saw Margaret, in her pink bathrobe, quietly directing a landscaping truck with hand signals at 5:30 a.m. They dumped it, and she gave them a thumbs up before walking back into her house like nothing happened. I didn't do anything right away. I shoveled the mulch off to the side and called the city to file an illegal dumping complaint. That same day, someone egged my back window. Not the front, just the back, the one that directly faced her yard. I knew it was her, but I couldn't prove it. No camera caught the act. Still, it was too perfect to be random. Then came the notes. Folded papers started showing up in my mailbox on my porch, even tucked under my windshield wiper. Most of them had things like, "Stop being petty," or "Why ruin something beautiful?" all written in slanted cursive handwriting with no signature. I knew it was her. She was unraveling. Or maybe this was her version of power plays. But I stayed quiet. I kept every note in a folder. I kept every weird photo from my cameras. My lawyer said to let her dig her own hole, so I waited. Then, she started messing with guests. My cousin Lisa came over one afternoon. As she was walking up the driveway, Margaret appeared on her own front lawn, arms crossed. Lisa said she stared at her the whole way, then muttered something like, "Another visitor for the neighborhood disgrace." Lisa told me, and I just laughed it off. But then Lisa showed me a Facebook post Margaret had made public, not even private, where she wrote, "It's a shame when once good neighborhoods turn into trashy Airbnb zones. Constant visitors. Loud noise. No class." She had taken a photo of Lisa's car and posted it alongside. It wasn't even a good photo. But still, I'd had enough. I printed it. I added it to the folder. That same week, she had a stone sign installed on her lawn that said "Serenity Garden" for public enjoyment. It was a jab. No one was actually allowed into her yard. It was just a move to say, "Look what I offer the neighborhood, and look what he hides behind his wall." Then she crossed the line. Late one Saturday night, I was reading on the couch when I heard a dull thud from the backyard. I checked the camera feeds. Nothing at first. But 10 minutes later, a second thud. I turned the brightness up. That's when I saw it. Someone tossing bags over my fence. Garbage bags. 2 of them. I went outside and sure enough, one had split open. Inside were clippings, dirt, and what looked like kitchen trash. I was livid. It was deliberate and it reeked. I cleaned it up and drove it to her front steps. Left it right by her porch light. Then I knocked once. Hard. She didn't come to the door, but I know she saw me. Next morning, there was a complaint filed against me with the HOA. Margaret claimed I was creating unsightly displays and threatening her with intimidation. So I took everything to the HOA. The videos, the notes, the Facebook post, the photos. I laid it all out. I didn't say much. Just let the folder speak. The board was quiet for a long time. They said they'd investigate. A few days passed. I came home and found 2 HOA officers walking around her yard, taking pictures. One of them nodded at me. Margaret was out there too, fuming. She was arguing with them, gesturing wildly toward the fence, toward my house. But no one was listening. One officer just kept jotting things down. Later that night, someone banged on my door. It was Margaret. Red-faced, eyes wide. "You think you've won?" she said, voice trembling. "This isn't over. You think you can hide behind your little fence and smug paperwork? I'll show you, petty." Then she stormed off. The next morning, I saw it. Someone, clearly her, had spray-painted across her side of the fence. "Prison wall, built by a coward," big, black letters. Sloppy. Obvious. But here's the twist. She painted it on my fence. Which legally, is my property. I took a photo, printed it, added it to the folder, and started planning the next move. That spray paint incident? It flipped something in me. Up until that point, I had kept it together. But standing there, coffee in hand, staring at "prison wall, built by a coward," written in black paint across my fence, something cracked. I wasn't even angry anymore. Just done. I didn't clean it. I didn't even touch it. Instead, I called the city. I reported graffiti on private property. They came out 2 days later, took photos, filed a report. I gave them the security footage, her in a hoodie and gloves at 2 a.m., pacing in front of the fence before grabbing a spray can from her coat and going to town. The next day, she replaced her front lawn sign with a new one. Don't let your neighbor poison the neighborhood spirit. The sign even had a QR code that led to a page on her gardening blog where she posted a community statement about how one person's walls create division and how beauty should never be hidden behind hate. I screenshotted everything. 2 weeks passed. Things got quiet. I should have known that meant she was planning something. My neighbor on the other side, Dave, knocked on my door. He was holding a letter and looked uncomfortable. Hey, he said. I got this. So did a few others. Thought you should know. It was a typed letter. No return address. Just a message titled, A Cry for Help from a Silenced Voice. The letter claimed I was emotionally unstable, antisocial, possibly dangerous, and even hinted that I had been hoarding strange chemicals in my garage. It asked neighbors to keep an eye on me and report suspicious activity to the HOA. The language was paranoid, theatrical, clearly written to stir panic. Margaret had gone full propaganda. I laughed when I read it. Then I got real quiet. Because here's what she didn't know. I had a friend in city zoning enforcement. A friend who owed me a favor. I asked her to check something for me. Took about a week. Turns out, Margaret had done a few sneaky upgrades in her backyard. Nothing crazy, just a few stone pathways and a pergola setup. But she never got the permits. And her garden shed? Too tall. Technically violated the local height ordinance by 14 inches. So I filed an anonymous complaint. City came out. Again. They inspected everything. And it wasn't just the shed. Her drainage system was improperly installed. The stone patio? Built too close to the property line. The inspector left her a list of code violations long enough to look like a CVS receipt. 3 days later, she was on her porch, yelling at someone on speakerphone, pacing in circles, running her hands through her hair. I sat on my porch with a lemonade and waved. She didn't wave back. Then one night, I saw the fire. Not a literal one, her house didn't burn down or anything, but her rage caught fire online. Margaret made a video. A full 7-minute monologue on her garden page, ranting about hostile property takeovers, corporate stooges in neighborhoods, and aggressive male neighbors trying to erase community beauty. She posted it everywhere. Facebook, Nextdoor, even YouTube. Problem was, she used drone footage of my backyard in it. Without permission. Drone footage she must have taken weeks earlier, probably before the new fence went up. That was a whole new violation of privacy laws. So I called my lawyer again. This time, he didn't even hesitate. Let's go for an injunction. And damages. We filed the papers. The day she got served, she was in the front yard, watering her rose bushes like nothing was wrong. The moment the process server handed her the envelope, she froze. Didn't say a word. Just stared at it. Then, slowly looked up at my house. I was watching through the blinds. A few hours later, her Serenity Garden sign disappeared. The blog post vanished. The Facebook video got taken down. But that same night, I heard hammering. At 1 a.m. When I checked the cameras, I saw her out there. Nail gun in one hand. Hammer in the other. She was building something on her side of the fence. Some kind of weird art structure, wood panels covered in mirrors and wind chimes. And at the top, a giant fake owl, facing my house, like a scarecrow. I couldn't stop laughing. And that's when I decided to stop reacting. Because Margaret wasn't trying to win anything anymore. She was just trying to get a response. But what she didn't know was, I had one last move coming. Not loud, not dramatic. Just the kind of move that would shut her antics down for good. I kept calm after the owl thing. I didn't say a word, didn't do anything. Let her have her mirrors and wind chimes. I didn't even tell the city. But I was planning something quiet, final, and legal. And it started with a surveyor. I hired a professional land surveyor. Paid extra to get it done fast. He came with all the equipment, measured everything, marked property lines to the inch. I followed him around as he worked, and after a few hours, he gave me a folder. Inside were the results. Margaret's stone path? On my land. The garden bed with the tiny fountain she was so proud of? Also mine. Her Serenity Garden extended nearly 3 feet onto my property. I stared at that map for a long time. Then I called my lawyer. We filed a quiet title action, basically, a lawsuit to clear up property boundaries. The goal was simple: make her tear out every inch of what spilled into my yard. Legally force her to undo her masterpiece. And she had no idea it was coming. Not until a county officer knocked on her door with the court papers. She read them right there on her porch. Her hands were shaking. I was outside at the time, pretending to water the lawn. She looked at me like I had set fire to her home. I didn't say anything. She tried to fight it. Claimed the land was hers. Claimed she'd been maintaining it for years. But the survey didn't lie. The documents didn't lie. The property markers were there. And she lost. The court gave her 30 days to remove everything that crossed the boundary. Every stone, every bush, every piece of garden art. She tried to appeal. Denied. She tried to delay. Denied. She had to rip out her own garden. It was brutal. I watched workers tear up the path she laid by hand. I watched them dig up the rose bushes she'd spent years nurturing. That little fountain? Gone in one afternoon. Her yard was left half barren and uneven. Like a battlefield after the storm. She didn't come outside for days. But I wasn't done. Remember that video she posted of my yard? The drone footage? We won the lawsuit over that too. Her video violated state privacy laws. She had to pay me damages. Not enough to change my life, but enough to make hers harder. And I took the money and rebuilt my yard. Not just the fence. I redid my patio. Added a small koi pond. Put in motion sensor lights that lit up if anyone got too close to the fence. It was peaceful. Beautiful. Private. Margaret, though? The city hit her with more fines for the unpermitted work she never finished removing. The HOA sanctioned her for neighbor harassment. She got a lien on her house when she didn't pay fast enough. I heard from a neighbor that she tried to sell the place. No one would buy. Too many violations. Bad reputation. The story had spread. And me? I wasn't perfect. I probably could have de-escalated sooner. Maybe I got too deep into the revenge. But when someone takes something from you, your space, your peace, your right to be left alone, sometimes the only way to stop them is to make sure they understand just how far you're willing to go. One day, I saw her loading things into a U-Haul. She didn't look at me. But as she drove away, I walked into my yard, past the pond, past the flowers, and sat on my porch in silence. The fence stood tall behind me. And finally, it was quiet.